And we are live. Hi, Ben.
Hi, how are you?
So I think this is the start to a new thing
Oh,
called Deep Dive.
I think that name's taken. No?
Is it? Darn.
No, it's not taken if you do this with your fingers, then it's different. Yeah, that's
It's
fine.
like
Are
how
those,
many
wait,
quotes?
they're single quotes though. That's good for JavaScript. Either that or they're just two tiny people.
Double quotes.
Double quotes. That's four tiny people.
These are our friends watching us on the internet.
All four of them.
Now 6. It's growing. Okay. So, anyways, let's talk about this deep dive. So each deep dive is going to be 20 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
And you're going to take me through the inner depths of RxJS 7 and like some of the exciting features. So I'm going to start the timer.
All right, go.
Are you ready?
There's a timer? Okay.
Are you ready?
Yeah.
Okay, hold on. All right, timer, 20 minutes. Share your screen. I'm ready to go.
All right, let me share my screen.
Okay, it's going to be so amazing.
There, my screen has you on it.
Oh my gosh, I can't even stand it right now.
All right, so everything for
I want code, Ben.
I'll get there. Everything for RxJS 7 is in the experimental branch on the same repository. Okay. And anyone who wants to come explore comes down and it talks about the things that need to be done. And there's a link to the design document. And the design document is here. Anybody can come look at it. And we're going to be talking today about just the things that were decided in here. So this design document existed before I actually started any work on this. But basically, we've kind of loosely based everything off of Andre Stelz's callbacks.
Wait, and press that stop or press that like that thing. Yeah.
Sorry, is it visible? Sorry. All right. So it's loosely based on Andre Stelz's callbacks, and just so people can see that, I want to go look at that really quick. At least the code example. I believe there's an example somewhere on here, but the idea is that, I guess it's not in there. Here, maybe. So yeah, so the idea is you have these functions that have like a type, number, and a payload, and they return nothing, at least in callbacks. And so the type will be like 0 will be start, which for us is subscription. 1 will be data, which for us is next. And then 2 is end, which for us is complete. But like that's not everything that we can do for RxJS. Like we also need to have an error channel. And in callbacks, they use end to also signal error. The problem with that is you can't really send falsy signals as an error, and it's totally valid in JavaScript to throw false if you want, or throw a 0, or even throw null. So like that's not something we can do in RxJS. So we had to add one more. So that's one way that we're different. And the other way that we're different than Andre Stelz's callbacks is we have in callbacks, what you do for a subscription is you subscribe to like an observable sort of thing. And then there's this handshake process where the thing that is the sync, which happens to be the same shape as this. So the observer is the same shape function. So they have producer and consumer, right? You have to then send a start to it with another function that is your teardown function. So like you're responsible not only for subscribing, but then going the opposite direction and saying, oh, you've subscribed, here's like a subscription that I'm handing back and forth. So there's this kind of dance that you have to do to get everything started. And that's not really necessary in, they do that in callbacks because then you can support both pull and push kind of semantics, but it's not really necessary in RxJS because we only do push. So we've changed it a little bit to where we have our functions. I have this thing called a fobs, which is right here. So it's a functional observable. And we have a type, which this maps to the same sort of numbers plus one additional number for error. We have an argument, which is the same thing as what they were calling a payload, but I'm also threading through a subscription every time. And what this enables us to do is it enables us to create a subscription once, and then through the entire observable chain, we actually pass the same subscription object all the way through. Where in RxJS 6, the subscription object was the subscriber, and then we were kind of threading them through that way. This way, we can kind of have those two different things detached. So this is the main workhorse of RxJS 7. And you'll see like sources are kind of underlying an observable, and syncs, which underlie a consumer.
So this kind of scares me because I'm like, oh my gosh, fob, sync. When you're actually using RxJS, you don't need to know any of this, right? This is just implementation.
Right. Okay. So this is
you're making your life more complicated, but nobody else has to. Like Ben's life is now more complicated.
Right. So now what we end up happening with, so the big hurdle here was like, okay, well, the API for callbacks, while it's like very lean and nice, is not the nicest API in the world to have to deal with. Like people have to know all these, like how, like literally what 6 different ways to call the same shaped function. And it's not straightforward, but the API for RxJS is something people are familiar with, and it's not that bad. So what we do is we still have the same observable, and the observable interface, believe it or not, an instance of observable is also an instance of one of these fobs functions, right? But what we do, and I'm going to jump into the code here on the repository, is we actually take the function instance and we patch it with the same, like with the subscribe function and a pipe function. So let's go have a look. Here's observable. And we've got, this is just TypeScripty stuff to make sure that everything lines up okay. But I've got the observable constructor here, and we've got this function inside of here, and it's a fobs function. You see this type, we're passing a sync. So the type here in this case is always going to be subscribe, and we're just using TypeScript to be specific about that. We've got the sync here and this subscription, and then we're inside of here, we're doing the logic. So if this is the observable constructor and you say new, if you say new observable, here's the init function that you're passing in. And we're just saying, oh, look, if you passed in an init function, then I want you to create a subscriber with, you know, the sync and the subscription. And I want you to get the teardown from the init function. Right, and then if we have an error, then we're going to, if we have an error while trying to execute the init function, we're going to send an error signal down the observable chain, and we're going to unsubscribe.
So this is like really, really good information for people who are looking to actually contribute to RxJS, because they're going to basically need to learn all this stuff in order to start making good contributions, correct?
Right, yeah. I mean, so the thing that you end up looking for in all the code is this sort of signature here where you've got a function that you're calling with an FO type, and then an argument, and the last one's always a subscription. And so in this case, we've got the subscriber. So this is whatever. So whenever you pass in 3 callbacks or you pass in your observer, it gets wrapped inside of this subscriber function. And this is saying, hey, send something to the error handler. And this is what I want you to send to the error handler. And by the way, it happens to be on this subscription. I want you to send that through. So if anything else needs to unsubscribe, which eventually in an error situation, it would unsubscribe. It actually unsubscribes in the next line. I need that everyone to know that that's the subscription that goes through. So this is the basic sort of thing you look for. And like, to subscribe to an observable, and if you had an instance of observable, technically you could call the observable like a function with 0, which is subscribe, and then pass a function of this shape to it, and pass a new subscription to it, and you would subscribe to it in that way. Like you could if you wanted, but we don't have to do that because we have this source as observable, and it's a helper function that gets used elsewhere, which is why it's factored out into a different file. But if we go look at that, source is observable. What it does is it takes that source function. So again, this source is a fob. So it's a function with the signature FO type, some argument, and a subscription. And you see it just takes that instance and it adds a subscribe, adds a pipe, adds a for each, adds a to promise, like the things that people end up having to use in RxJS. So here's our subscribe function. This way we're sharing the same instance of subscribe with everything. Now, some people are going to look at this and be like, well, holy crap, man, like this is probably going to be slower because every time you're creating an instance of observable, you're now like patching these things onto a function reference. And that does de-optimize some things, but not near as bad as some of the megamorphic call sites we had inside of RxJS 6. And the other thing to think about with this design is before when we were doing this, like at every single level, we had all of these subscriber objects. So like in every single operator and stuff, we had subscriber objects, and now we have just functions. So a subscriber object is an object reference, and like at least 6 function references, 2 for next, 2 for error, and 2 for complete, and a bunch of other stuff. Like they're kind of heavyweight objects. In RxJS 7, they're just a function, like a single function, along with whatever other minor functions that are required to make it work. But the point being is the memory pressure will be a lot lower. Meaning that this will run a lot better on, resource constrained devices and crappy mobile phones and that sort of thing. So not only is it smaller, but it runs lighter in the browser. So these are all like so for each subscribe. This is where we're making the sync that's passed in safe, so you can't call it like. You can't call error after the subscription that's attached to it's closed, and so on and so forth.
Do you feel like this is going to be confusing for people at all?
that are contributing?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that's why I wrote the design doc. Like, I do think that it'll be confusing for some folks. But honestly, it's one of those things where once you're done, like writing it, it's the patterns to it are so consistent that it's not too bad. So for example, let's go look at like an operator, like the map operator or something. If you go, it's the wrong spot under operators.
We have 5 more minutes. Isn't this exciting? It's like pressure's on, Ben.
Yeah. So one thing to note when you're looking at these is these operators, the ones under the root operators are all implemented from scratch, and the ones under derived are all implemented using other operators. So
that's pretty cool.
Yeah, so that's one difference. But if we go and we look at map or filter, map's probably a good one. So map, you'll see it's very, very small. And what we have is there's this lift method that gets used in every single operator. And all lift is just, I can show it in a second. It's just, it does some things that were kind of repetitive between all of the operators. But inside of here, we're subscribing to the source. So the source is, again, a function. We're passing 0 to it. And then a function reference that is our sync that we're using to subscribe with. And this is saying, okay, every time we get a signal of next, do this. And that is try our projection. If it's an error, then send an error signal down to the destination. Otherwise, in this case, it'll be next. So send a next with the new value down to the destination with the subscription. In other cases, you'll get an error signal or a complete signal, and we're just allowing that to pass through, right? So we can kind of leverage the fact that it's always using the same function to make everything smaller. So that's kind of nice. But like, it's not like basically this function here gets called for error or next or complete. And the way you know which one it's being called for is with this T. And this is the argument that it's being called with. And this is just always the subscription. And so inside of this body, you're just like, oh, well, this is going to be, I know how this is going to be executed. And you usually just have some conditional in here that says, well, if it's next, then do this one thing. Otherwise, whatever. So like it is, while it is confusing in comparison to like next calls next, and error calls error, and complete calls complete. At the same time, it's way less code to grok in a lot of cases. So it's not something where once you learn it, you're going to be like, oh, this is mind bending. Like, it's not that mind bending. There's the lines of code that matter in here are like 9 lines of code. So it's not too bad. And let me think. Oh, the other thing that's kind of interesting is to look at subject. So we know that observables are functions that get called with subscribe, and the observers are functions that get called with next, error, or complete. But a subject then is a function that gets called with subscribed, next, or error, or complete, right? So it can be called with any of those things. And if I look at subject, and this one, I think it goes around, there might be a subject source that I have to get from somewhere else, but yeah, subject source is coming from a different file because it's shared. Sorry. Let's go here. Subject base source. So the basic subject is just this. This is a whole subject. And it's this function that when you call subscribe, it pushes your sync, that would be your argument. It pushes that onto the state here, along with the subscription. So it just kind of keeps one array that has both of those two things together. And then it adds this bit to the subscription that says, hey, when you unsubscribe, I want you to remove that subject and that sync from the state in this subject.
So right? This is kind of follow the whole thing where I know in 6 you were like, oh, okay, well, everything is just functions now. So it's way more awesome. But does this take it like another step, or is this kind of like following the same thing, or?
Yeah, it's another step. Like in this one, it literally everything is just a function, like literally. So yeah, and then in subjects here, you've got if you subscribe, you do this bit here, which is just adding what you're subscribing with to an array. And if you're not subscribing, then it must be a next, error, complete. And so if you happen to have anything in your array, then it'll loop over your array and notify them all of whatever your argument is, or whatever you've passed through. So if it's a next or an error complete, and then whatever the argument passed. So subjects become ridiculously tiny compared to what we had before.
I love it.
Of course, these get decorated with the same source as observable to make them observables. And there's another one called source as subject to also make them subject. So they have a next, error, and complete method on them as well. So the API, the public API is all the same. And the only other thing I really want to show before we run out of time is that what I'm doing when I do this stuff is all of the tests that we had already written. No, I'm in the wrong spot. All of the tests that we had already written for RxJS 6 are being reused. So if I go and I look at what did I do? Did I go back to the?
I think you're looking at master right now.
Yeah, I went back to master. Okay. I clicked up at the top. That was my mistake. All of the tests that we used before, using exactly the same tests inside of RxJS 7, and even better, they're refactored slightly to be tested in exactly the same way that external users could test their code.
So this, like, testing's better, basically.
Yeah. Testing's better in that they're exactly the same tests as before. So we know that the functionality in RxJS 7 is identical to the functionality in RxJS 6. And also, people can now go look at these tests and literally copy them and run them verbatim, and they'll run in their own code. Because before we couldn't do that. We had these custom globals and other things where we were doing custom things for our tests. Now this is exactly what you could use to test your own code. You could use it as a template for how to test your code, which is not something you could do with the current stuff. So that should be kind of a big deal on its own. But oh my God, there's a tab missing there. Ah!
So basically, like, don't freak out because it's all the same code and our tests prove it.
Right, exactly. So obviously there are stuff that there are things that we had deprecated before that that are going to be removed in this major version, because that was the plan to begin with. Mm-hmm. There are some other proposed changes that I'm going to see how they go in alpha, and to see what all of the differences are. You can go under where is it? Right here. Oh, I keep going back to master. Damn it.
Well, when can people, by the way, when I know, when is Ivy at? More like, when is RxJS 7 ready, you think?
Oh, so this is actually a good thing to look at that for that too. So here's a few differences of things that we did. Like anything like from and of that had scheduler arguments before, I actually broke those off because I was able to make those a lot smaller by doing that. So they exist, but there's like a from scheduler that you would use instead of those two things. So these are just like changes that would exist in this either because they have to. For example, lift is no longer unobservable. We might be able to have a backwards compat thing to do those sorts of things, or they're changes that are just like, I want to see if we can get by with not having a scheduler argument on combine all and that sort of thing, just to see how they land. And if we find out from people's alpha usage that that's just too painful for people, then we'll add them back in or whatever. But because it's alpha, we're just going to kind of try to see what sticks. Here's the to-do list for all the operators. Anything with a check mark is already done. So as you can see, most things are already done. It's very, very close. And once all of these are checked, go through and there's some other different creation methods to make sure that we have. But once all that's done, then we're ready for alpha, and we'll be able to get people starting to use it. We'll probably try to use it inside of Google to see, just to kind of see what breaks, because I can run it against thousands and thousands of files inside of Google and see if it breaks too many people, and then try to update things. So that'll make the things smoother for the external world. But yeah, it's very close. It all just depends on how much time I get to work on it, of course.
I love it. Okay, and we are at time. That was so amazing, Ben. Stop sharing your screen so we can see your pretty face.
I'll stop screen sharing on this. I've got a new, there we go.
I put makeup on today, and I'm glad I put makeup on today because, then I can do weird things like this, which we literally decided to do this like 20 minutes ago, right, Ben?
Yeah,
I was like, hey, Ben, you want to do something? Yeah.
You're like, yeah, let's screen share. And I'm like, okay. Let's screen share. What are we screen sharing? Oh, by the way, this is live. We're going to go on YouTube. Oh, okay.
Well, anyways, thank you so much for doing that. That was super awesome. Let's remind people how they can actually contribute to RxJS. So number one, you can Twitter message me at LadyLeet, and that's twitter.com/LadyLeet. And you can ask for a invite to the RxJS Slack channel, and I can invite you there. And then you can start chatting on the RxJS docs or RxJS 6, which I'll have to change the channel name to RxJS 7 at some point in time.
Yeah.
Exciting. What else can they do, Ben? What are some other? They can attend Rx Workshop, which will be exciting too, where you learn the fundamentals of RxJS. And
I donate my profits to charity.
Yes. Yes, you donate all your profits to charity, which is super awesome.
Yeah.
Or you can follow Ben Lesh on Twitter and watch him get frustrated about all the exciting things related to doing this new RxJS 7. Okay, so then what about RxJS 8?
8? I don't know. Like, hopefully this is so good that we don't need an 8. But my suspicion is, if there's an 8, when there's an 8, it'll be because there are features we want to deprecate and or remove, and that'll be the.
Yeah, but are you going to do another rewrite, because RxJS 6 was a rewrite and RxJS 7 is another rewrite?
Well, no, 5 was a rewrite.
6 sorry. Okay. So you're not going to do another rewrite?
No.
Wait, no, you rewrote the entire library for 6 to make the bundle size smaller.
No. What I did is I made all of the operators pipeable, which wasn't really a rewrite. It was just a refactor.
Okay, so it was a refactor. So you didn't do, there hasn't been 3 rewrites. There's only been 2 rewrites.
Right. Rewrite. Right.
Right?
Right.
All right. Tell us something really exciting before we hop off.
So the most exciting thing in my head, and this might be boring for some people, is whenever the RxJS stuff 7 stuff is starting to settle down, I am going to be laser focused on trying to get the docs to be much, much better. So that means getting lots of good examples, getting like probably rewriting most of the docs to make sure that people understand the basics and have common patterns that, you know, if I have 5 HTTP calls and I want to coordinate them in this way, like how do I do it? Like just coming at like answering a lot of those important questions that so many people have at Google and elsewhere, because I think that we've handed the world a very powerful tool and then we didn't really tell enough people how to use it. And so hopefully that's exciting to somebody that we're gonna come up with better instructions for the tool we've handed them. But yeah.
Cool. Okay. Say bye to the internet.
Bye, internet. Wait, are we?
We have 14 friends. So how many is that?
14 friends? There's 14 friends watching this?
Yeah, I have 13 now, but I have 10 fingers.
I got 4. Are we good?
Yeah. All right, don't leave. I'm going to stop the stream, but don't leave me.
Okay.
Don't leave me, Ben.
All right.
Okay. Thanks, everyone, for watching, though.
Thanks.